With a big two-goal performance against the Anaheim Ducks, Tyler Toffoli has finally arrived. The goal scorer was part of a big Jets 6-0 victory over Anaheim. Find out more on tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets.
You're Locked On the Hockey Jets, your daily podcast on the Winnipeg Jets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Evening, friends, and welcome to tonight's episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Harrison Lee, an avid Winnipeg Jets fan and an online blogger. You can follow me on Twitter at HLivingLoco and at LO_Winnipeg Jets. Thanks for making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. If you like what you're hearing, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe on all of your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. Doing so, of course, is always free of charge and ensures you never miss another episode. Most of all, though, we just love and appreciate your support. Tonight's episode, like I said, we're going to spend some time talking about Winnipeg versus Anaheim. A 6-0 shutout victory for Laurent Brossoit, his second straight shutout in his starts. And, obviously the Jets kind of came on pretty strong in this game. They basically controlled from front to back. And, you might say that the new line combos maybe worked. Maybe there was some extra confidence and a little bit of a hint of attitude, right? The Jets were pretty unhappy, especially after getting, kind of schooled by the Preds, right? And Anaheim presented a great, beat up dummy, right? You could just watch the Jets control the game, and they completely annihilated Anaheim at any of their competitiveness. So what I'll say is this, right? This is probably not a game where I'm going to take a ton away from it, but it was still a fun game, a big evening, and, a lot of players got on the scoreboard, whether it was Mason Appleton, Tyler Toffoli with a couple of goals, Ehlers with a couple of assists, the top line with a really nice outing with Iafallo now up there with Connor-Scheifele, and, Connor got himself a nice deflected goal. Some big boy shifts from Scheifele. I believe a three-point night for Josh Morrissey. Even DeMello and Schmidt got him on the goal scoring. So just a lot going on. Obviously, tons of guys who probably needed to break their scoreless streak kind of cashed in. And Anaheim, for their part, just basically looked like a team that had already given up almost from the first period. The Ducks never really pressured the Jets, and you honestly got the sense that it was like playing on a power play for almost the whole game. Winnipeg just completely eliminated any sort of danger from the Ducks. Anaheim did have a couple of good chances, but other than that, nothing really threatened Brossoit, and Laurent probably had one of his easier shutouts of his career. It was a pretty straightforward game, only a couple of really dangerous moments where Brossoit maybe sprawled out a little bit, but really big game from him in those key moments, and the Jets just kind of did the rest. So the reason why I'm going to say that we shouldn't read a ton into the results here is because Anaheim is kind of a bit of a pincushion right now. They're not exactly a team that presents the Jets a big challenge. And that's where I think there's kind of been a split recently is, the Jets have played a lot of teams that are on the weaker side, and they can grease those teams without much trouble. But against the top teams, that is where Winnipeg has struggled recently. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to have a couple of really tough opponents, one as soon as Tuesday against the Rangers. So, get a little bit excited for that. I think that could be a big litmus test for where the Jets are. And if they can beat the Rangers convincingly, maybe we'll start to feel that they're back. But of course, with this game, some interesting things. Iafallo looked relatively comfortable on the first line, but I think against a faster, heavier forechecking team, you'll probably notice that line starts to fade again. I think Ehlers is probably one of the few players that the Scheifele and Connor combo works with because Nick just does so much of the transition work. If KFC and Scheifele don't have a particularly aggressive blue line press from the opponents, where they sort of stack the line and cut off those spaces, they don't have to worry as much. They can kind of glide through and cut up opponents relatively easy. But the moment that they face a lot of pressure, that's when you've seen problems. And Ehlers is one of the few guys who's really skillful at getting through those blocks and creating space for that line. So, against the Ducks, this trio did really well and had probably one of the strongest outings for a first line from this Jets team in some time. So congrats to them. Again, like I said, I wouldn't read too much into it yet. I'd need to see them do it against, better opponents on a pretty consistent basis before I get really excited. Second line looked pretty all right. They generally controlled all of their chances. They dominated later in the game and really looked like they were starting to cook pretty nicely. Ehlers again dishing off some really high danger chances. Toffoli and Monahan getting close to, or in many cases for Toffoli, capitalizing on those opportunities. Just a lot to like, and a really fun evening for a Jets team that honestly just needed it. It sounds like the flu or whatever has been eating through this team has really taken a toll on the squad. And, with the confidence kind of sagging a little bit, the recent lack of success against playoff teams, all of that's been probably weighing on the minds of a lot of these guys. And, you look at the other teams the Jets have beat recently, and they weren't really blowing them out. It was like a 3-1 victory here, a 3-0 victory there, close margins. And I think the Jets just needed a team that they could kind of beat up on, remind themselves that they're still, near the top of the Western Conference, currently in first as of right now for the Central Division, since they've got some games in hand. So, I think this was a game that maybe even more than the fans, the team itself needed. A comfortable victory, like I said, one where I'm not going to get like crazy excited, but I'm pretty happy with the result. Like I said, you really can't complain about a victory. It just, you can't really, you don't get to pick your opponents, right? It is what it is. And I think, against better teams, we might be a little bit in for a rough awakening. Well, not really awakening. I think we're all aware of where the Jets stand against playoff teams, but maybe Winnipeg will surprise us over the next few weeks. Maybe they'll take some points out of those really tough matchups. That's what I'm hoping for. Maybe use something like this, some softer opponents for a springboard for success. I do have to wonder about some of the lineup changes, though. Stanley and Schmidt did their job well, but I think you probably want to go back to Samberg and Miller on a more consistent basis. Perfetti was also scratched for this game, and I wonder if it's partly because maybe the flu bug has kind of impacted them. Miller just arrived, so I can't imagine that he's really gotten sick, but if he has, that'd be pretty unfortunate. But I think maybe it was because it's just Anaheim that, Bones felt like he could rotate the squad a little more. So if those guys were impacted by the flu, or whatever it is, we think it's the flu. That's what it's been suggested to be, but perhaps there's something else going on because it's lasted a while, and we've had some interesting health reports, one of which we'll talk about later in the episode with Gabriel Vilardi's status and his health. But, regardless, I think this should be a nice springboard for at least a couple of the players, and hopefully in the next game we see some of our star talents draw back into the lineup and continue to, maybe build some momentum for a longer winning streak. The last thing I think the Jets want to do is kind of sputter out here. So, maybe use this little bit of a confidence boost to keep things going, get another win streak rolling, and maybe, just maybe, we'll start to see them turn the tide in that playoff success category. But of course, I wanted to spend some time talking about our newest arrivals, Tyler Toffoli and Colin Miller, kind of spotlighting how they've really fit in and how Tyler in particular has been a great addition to the Jets. Before we go too much further, though, I did want to shout out our friends and partners at Robinhood Retirement. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is only good through April 30th. Get started at robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are just kind of recapping some thoughts from not only the game against Anaheim, big win, obviously, a big shutout victory, Laurent Brossois' second shutout in as many games. But for the Jets, I think it was also a nice time that Tyler Toffoli finally recorded his first Jets goals. Obviously, it feels like it's been a little overdue. he's kind of been everywhere, and I wanted to spend some time talking about what he's brought to the Jets in his limited game so far and how Colin Miller has also been fitting in. But before we get to that, just wanted to let you know, especially a lot of you baseball fans, about something that's really cool and coming up very soon. As you know, I've talked about this before, but Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel, Locked On Sports Today. But for all of you baseball fans, you should mark your calendars for March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern for the best MLB season preview coming exclusively to Locked On Sports Today. On March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern, be the first to get local insight from our local experts of the Locked On Network. Find it on March 20th at 7 p.m. Eastern on the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube and on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. Now, like I said, obviously the Jets have a couple of big additions to the team. You know, the trade deadline was a very profitable one for Winnipeg and probably one that I think, you know, some of us were hoping for, but maybe not exactly expecting. In previous years, though, I'll say this. I would say Chevy probably deserves the benefit of the doubt now versus in previous years where maybe the Jets weren't really active. The past year or two has seen like a really big change in my mind in how the Jets approach not only the trade deadline, but sort of the roster movement and trades. It feels like they've gotten really aggressive and they've made some really smart acquisitions that have fit in beautifully. And two of those, Colin Miller and Tyler Toffoli, have looked to be pretty good. We'll start off with Miller because I think he's probably been, I would say, one of the quieter acquisitions between the two. Colin is one of those guys who has comfortably fit in alongside Samberg. And what you'll get with him is a bit of a trigger-happy blue liner, right? This guy, if the puck is in the offensive zone, he is going to find it and vulcanize it off the goalkeeper, which for the Jets is actually not a problem. I know that Stanley's point shooting at times has been a little bit lackluster, but I feel like with Miller, because he hammers it so hard and because he creates so many deflections and stuff, I think he might actually get a little bit more productivity out of what he creates rather than Stanley, who sometimes doesn't always have the best shooting instincts. Although I think recently I've liked where Logan has started taking his shots from. He'll attack like the face-off circles. With Miller, Miller doesn't even need to get there. He just slaps it from like a million miles away. But because he hits that puck so hard, he does create a lot of rebounds, and I think at some point some of those will probably start going in the back of the net, either as deflections or from second chance opportunities from his line mates. So I'm happy about him. I think he's looked very nice for the modest pick that the Jets gave up, and I can't really complain about his performance so far. Interesting that he was scratched for the Ducks game. That I would like to hear something about, find out why that was the case. Maybe he's not feeling well. I don't know. Just kind of a weird one. Maybe they just wanted to rotate Logan and Naden. So, I mean, if that's the reasoning, fine. Those guys are important depth pieces, and, resting a couple of players here and there probably isn't the worst, but all the same, would be interested to know the thinking on that. But I wanted to spend a little more time talking about Toffoli because I feel like Toffoli has been, despite not scoring in his first couple of games, he's been a very noticeable threat. The whole trigger happy thing that I mentioned with Colin is also the case with Toffoli. He was creating loads of chances in his first couple of games. He's been a constant threat. And while he doesn't have like crazy afterburner speed, it doesn't really matter because he's so smart and he's been a menace along the half wall before he transitions into the slot area and sometimes works below the goal line. He seemingly just wants to get the puck somewhere in dangerous areas around the net, and that has led to some really great scoring chances, a couple of big saves against him that have kind of kept him off the scoreboard. But finally, against the Ducks, he got a couple of greasy goals. The first one was off of a Monahan face-off where I just don't even know how he threaded this through, but there must have been a bit of a screen because he cleanly beat Gibson from a pretty far distance away, and it was an absolute sniper's release. A very quick, almost like a snapshot, not quite a snapshot, but a nasty wrister that beat Gibson through traffic from great distance. I don't think Gibson ever saw it, and I honestly missed it in the exact moment because you just wouldn't think many guys would shoot from there. But Toffoli is one of those guys who really does like to get the puck on net, and it was a brilliant finish. The second one was a nice little power play goal. This one kind of maybe deflected off of his skate or somewhere else on his equipment. He was kind of attacking the crease, tying up the defender, getting right in the mix of things, and, not even just a few seconds into the power play, deflects it home. So a great 2-goal performance, and I think this is just the start for him. I'm also curious to know, what the long-term plan with Toffoli is, because he's a player that I think the Jets would really be interested in bringing back if they can convince him to come back. He fits a really specific need for this team, and that is higher-end finishing talent. This is his 29th goal now on the season, which, the Jets don't really have a lot of 30-goal scorers right now. In fact, I don't know that they really have anyone who's hit that number yet. So for the Jets, this is a really big player that they could add at perhaps a reasonable cap hit. If they can keep the term between like 3 and 4 years, I think that'd be ideal. If they do like a 5-year deal, you just lower the AAV and kind of keep that cap hit down, which might actually be beneficial and maybe even more effective, because like you only care about the first couple of years. After that, if you need to move the deal, you totally can. It probably wouldn't be that hard. And we know that, with the Jets core being the way it is and sort of the time frame being this year and next, you really got to give yourself every single advantage that you can, because as much as I've really talked up prospects like, Rucker McGroarty and Brad Lambert, you just can't expect them to jump into this lineup immediately and become big impact players as soon as next season. They're going to need some time to adjust to the NHL level. And in between then, it'd be good to surround those talented pieces with some really good veteran players. And I think Toffoli is one of those guys that I would look at prioritizing. And given how much the Jets were apparently aggressively chasing this one, it might mean that they have longer-term plans for him in the same vein that they do Nino Niederreiter. So something to keep an eye on for the future. I think Toffoli is very much going to be a big player for this team for the next few weeks and months. I hope that he is part of a very deep playoff run, because, he's been an absolute menace and a treat to watch. He's instantly improved this team. He and Miller were great acquisitions, and it's really nice that the Jets did not have to mortgage the future to bring them in. So let me know how you feel about both acquisitions. Are you excited about their performances so far? What do you think you'll see from them over the next few weeks? Give me your predictions maybe for how many goals you think Toffoli might score, something like that. Just a little bit of fun. I could see him having, 8 to 10 goals for the Jets, maybe even a little bit more, from the regular season into the playoffs. I just hope that he gets to have many opportunities to score, because that means that the Jets might be going on a deep playoff run. So keep that in mind, but let's hope for a deep run and a really big performance from Tyler, because it sounds like the Jets are about to lose one of their big wingers for an undisclosed amount of time, and that winger, of course, is Gabriel Vilardi. We'll talk about what's going on with him and what it might mean for the Jets lineups here over the next few weeks. But before we dive into that fun stuff, just wanted to shout out our friends and partners at Ibotta. Grocery bills are extremely expensive, and anyone who has a family, or sometimes even if you're just shopping for yourself, you know that those bills add up really quickly. A couple of packs of sandwich meat, maybe some pasta, some sauce, all the ingredients. You start finding yourself adding it all up, and you know what? You're spending a lot more than you thought. Well, Ibotta totally knows that you're probably in the hole for a few bills, and they want to make things easy, right? They want to help you save money and not only save cash, but also give you cash back. Ibotta is a free app that gives you the most cash back every time you shop on hundreds of items, from groceries to beauty supplies to toys, because they know that you've got to include the family in it as well. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user saves $256 per year. That could cover the cost of a shopping trip, maybe a little excursion, maybe a day at a nice hotel somewhere. Whatever you want to use that cash back on, Ibotta wants you to enjoy yourself. Maybe you even spend a little bit more on that lobster dinner. Other apps give you points that you don't really get to use or that don't give you great discounts. Ibotta gives you tons of cash back for tons of different brands and retailers, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and so much more. So not only do you have a great selection of places to shop with, but you are making some cash back every time you do. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 free just for trying Ibotta using the code LOCKEDONNHL when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back and use code LOCKEDONNHL. That's IBOTTA in the Google app or Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONNHL. Hello, friends, and welcome back to this episode of Locked On Winnipeg Jets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Every day, thank you so much for rejoining us on tonight's episode as we are wrapping up really quickly with some thoughts on Gabriel Vilardi. It has just come out that he has an enlarged spleen. That news came earlier today during practice, which let's just say that was not what I was expecting. I think all of us were suspecting maybe like a back injury. That was kind of the rumor. He's had back issues before. An enlarged spleen, though, that was totally by surprise, to be honest. I don't know that anyone suspected like an organ injury of some sort would be ailing him. So sounds really serious. All I can say is I really hope he recovers quickly. They have said that the recovery process is an undisclosed amount of time. They don't really know how long this is going to take. And given that Ehlers was moved off the top line, I suspect that they're going to keep him on the second line with Monahan and Toffoli while Bones tries to figure out who amidst the rank and file depth forwards the Jets have can start to help that top line. Because Nemesnikov really couldn't do it. I don't think Iafallo is really going to do it against playoff teams. And so anything but Ehlers, I guess, is probably the takeaway. It's a shame because I think Nick is probably the most effective guy for that line. I will say that Bones did offer one, I guess, happy piece of news. If it starts to look like, no one else is really gelling, he did say he'd put Ehlers back up there on that first line. We'll see if that's really the case. I have my doubts and my suspicions, but you know what? I'll let it go for now. You just sometimes have to take folks at their word and see what happens after that. But in terms of the loss of Vilardi, this is actually a pretty big blow for the power play. On the first line, I guess it just means that you're not going to see that line get caved in as often. I really don't know why, but the Vilardi, Connor, and Scheifele trio was just really, really, really bad. And I don't know how it's going to be once Vilardi comes back, because he will return at some point this year, maybe in the next couple of weeks. But, until then, obviously, I think the biggest loss that we'll notice is that goal line power play bumper space that he really occupied, because the power play really just flowed through him. Thankfully, now that we have Toffoli, I think the loss is going to be a little bit mitigated. Monahan was already boosting the output there even before Vilardi returned. So I could imagine that Toffoli will be able to compensate a little bit more and offer some extra scoring prowess. It is just really unfortunate, though, that Vilardi is once again injured with something that's kind of a freak injury. You can't even really call it an injury, because I don't think it had anything to do with what happened in the game. An enlarged spleen could be related to whatever is running through the locker room, could just be a separate medical issue. Not going to speculate there. Just hope for a quick recovery and that he's feeling better soon. I can't imagine that that's a comfortable thing to go through, and anything that is going to physically limit you like that, you definitely want to take care of so that it doesn't get to be a serious issue later on. But yeah, big loss, a tough one. I guess the one bright side is that it's not like a recurring injury that Vilardi has had before, right? Gabriel has definitely had some rough stuff over the past couple of years. It almost threatened to derail his career. Doesn't sound like it's anything related to that. So if you can take like a bright side, I guess, a bit of positive news out of that, it's that the injury is definitely not something that's likely to be a long-term thing. At least I'm hoping. Your body can be a really sensitive thing, and organ stuff especially can be really complicated. But given what I've seen about, enlarged spleens and stuff, doesn't sound like it should be too bad. So hope for a quick recovery. We would love to see Gabriel Vilardi back on the ice for the Jets. It just seems like, the team is just better with him around. And, with the power play really starting to gel and click together, having him back would be a huge boost, especially now that we have Toffoli in tow. But let me know what you're thinking about the lineups. I think, we're going to see, hopefully, Connor-Scheifele and Ehlers towards the end of the year. I would really like to see that. Like I said, I don't know if we will, but it's just my hope. It's probably in vain, but it'd be nice if we get some top-line Nick, because he really has been creating tons of chances, and he'll have some silly turnovers and risky passes, but the stuff that he does in bulk right for you, the amount of stuff that he'll create for you on a routine basis, really does outweigh the mistakes that he makes. So some food for thought, but we'll see how the coaching staff treats it. But of course, the Jets are going to have a game on Sunday against the Columbus Blue Jackets. Monday's episode will be a recap of that and give you some takeaways and thoughts from how the Jets do, and probably a little bit of preview action ahead of their game against the Rangers as well. But for tonight's episode, that is going to be all the time that we have. I thank you so much for listening and making Locked On Jets your first listen of the day every day. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend, get some rest, and see you back here on Monday for Jets coverage.